Now, if you notice here, this is no longer negative. But in the last video, I ended telling you that PMT function is programmed to put this as a negative. Well, how do you change it to a positive? If I double click here, if I just put a negative in front of the principal amount, it'll change. So look, when I click where B8 is, you can see the answer. But if I put a negative in front, it'll automatically change it to a positive number. In a sense, meaning that you owe $255.82. The other thing I do want to tell you is this. There's really no need to put two zeros here at the end because by default, if you don't include a future value or an end or beginning, a 0 or a 1, it automatically defaults to 0. So we can save ourselves these last two steps in the next one. So here we go again. Equal sign, PMT, parenthesis, rate. Remember, that's given us in a yearly rate. So let's divide that by 12, comma. Number of periods, well, it says 2 years. But 2 years is how many months? Because remember, we're trying to figure out our monthly payment. We're going to multiply that by 12, comma. And then the last thing is the present value. How much is that motorcycle? F8. Now you can stop right here and close your parentheses because remember I told you previously that future value and end beginning automatically default to 0, so you don't even need to type it unless you wanted to change the future value or the last part where it says end or beginning. Instead of putting a 0 you put a 1, then you would do that. But again, you don't need to do it if it's both of them are 0. Remember, when I hit enter, this is going to be negative, so I'm going to go in front of the F8 and hit the negative sign and then hit enter. So $213.80 is how much I would owe per month for that motorcycle for 2 years. Remember, I'm paying $5,000, but I'm also paying interest. So the loan is $5,000, but I'm really going to be paying back more than $5,000 because I have to pay 2.5% interest every year since I borrowed that money up front. Okay, the last one's a little tricky. Equal sign, PMT, parenthesis. Okay, so again, rate. This is still given in years, so we'll click on J9 and divide that by 12, comma. Let's figure out this payment. The next part says number of periods. Well, it says 60. Well, are you going to pay on that for 60 years? Nope. Let me read over here. It says months. See how these say years? So when we calculated these two, we had to multiply this by 12. We had to multiply this by 12 to get how many months? This one, we don't have to multiply by 12 because it's given to us in months. So I'm just going to click J10. You have to look at that and figure that out by, looking at the column headings, making sure, is this in years or is this in months? Is the interest rate given to me in years or did they actually divide it by 12 and give it to me in months? Normally, again, the interest rate is always given to you in years. So now we have J9 divided by 12, comma J10, and then the last part, present value, that principal balance. We're purchasing this RV for $95,000, so we'll click J8. I forgot to put the negative sign before I click J8, so I'll just click in front and hit the negative sign. Go to the end, close my parenthesis, and then you can see for 60 months, meaning every single month, you're going to pay $1,771.09. And if you think that's a very large RV payment or car payment, you're absolutely right. Whoops. Let me change this back to 60. So now you can see what your payment would be for your boat, your motorcycle, or your RV. Your monthly payment for 60 months, your monthly payment for 2 years, which is 24 months, and your monthly payment for 4 years, which is 48 months. The last thing I want to show you is this. You notice these two numbers here. What are these all about? Well, I just want you to see that when you borrow money from a bank or a lender, some type of financial institution, they charge you for loaning that money up front so you can drive away with that RV or take that motorcycle home that day or take that boat on a trailer and pull it home. So yes, you paid $11,000 for that boat and then some because you had to pay the bank back 5.5%. So if I click here, notice what I did. I took V11, which is my payment amount, that $255.82, and I multiplied it by 48. 48 months. I'm going to pay $255 for 48 months. That's 4 years. 12, 24, 36, 48. So really, I paid $12,279.42 for that boat. I didn't pay $11,000. I paid $12,000 because I had to pay the bank back the interest that they charged me for loaning me that $11,000 up front so I could tow my boat home that day. This number here is taking this $12,000 in C11 minus my principal, meaning minus the loan that I originally took out for $11,000. So this was the actual amount I paid for the boat, but this number here in cell C11 is what I paid back to the lender because of the interest. So I paid $1,279.42 more, and that's what the bank made off of me. So if I do the same thing here, let's try it. $213.80 times 2 years, but that's how many months? That's 24 months. I really paid $5,131.25, which isn't so bad. $131.25, you can see that pretty easily. But if you wanted to do the math, equal sign G11 minus F8, oops, minus, I hit times, whoops, see, 131.25, like I said. So, you know, small, little bit of interest, 2.5%, that's pretty low. So you didn't pay much on it. So if you say, okay, well, I could pay on it for 2 years, I only paid an extra $131.25, and you're happy with that, I mean, it's okay, right? But the larger the balance, obviously, and the larger the interest rate, the more money you're going to pay back if you go that full term. We could do this last one here, equal sign payment amount times 60 months, $106,265.21 is what you would have paid for that RV. So how much extra did you pay? What did you pay the bank for that money up front? Well, let's take that 106, which is K12, minus that 95,000. You paid $11,000 more so that you could space out your payments over 60 months and still be able to afford that RV, but you're paying $11,265.21 to the bank. And that's how much they made off of you to loan you that $95,000. So there you have it, PMT function and the if function. Now, the last part here, college, university, trade school. This is what I'd like for you to do. Go ahead and pick 5 of your top colleges or universities or trade schools that you would maybe want to attend or even visit. And in these 2 columns, you're going to type in the out-of-state tuition and in-state tuition. If they're the same, then you'll type in the same number. So when you research it online, you'll just Google the university or school name or whatever, and Google out-of-state tuition per year and then in-state tuition per year, and type in that number here and here. And again, some of them might be the same. I'm just pretending that this is $25,000 for the year. Okay, let me just, and in-state tuition is the same. Let's pretend that they're the same. What I'm going to ask you to do is figure out a very simple formula what your 4-year total would be using the information on the left. Well, I live in PA, so I'm going to use the in-state tuition, and I'll say equal sign 25,000, which is D5 times E5. Now, if I lived in Ohio, I would use out-of-state tuition. Now, in this case, it's the same, but I still want to use this cell because we're talking about out-of-state. So my 4-year total is $100,000. Now I want to figure out how much I would owe back, meaning how much my payment would be when I go to start to pay back my loan. But some things are missing here. So if I use that PMT function, I need to have the rate available, which I don't. So let's type rate up here. And then I would need number of payments. Well, let's say that I'm going to pay on this for so many years, so we need that as well. Those two are missing. And then the principal, well, we have that. That's the loan balance. So for rates in years, I'm just going to rate align this so that you can see. And then over here, I'm going to left align these so that when I type in the rate, let's say your rate is 2.9%. And the years you're paying that back, let's say that's 15 years. So what you need to figure out using rate years and principal balance is how much you're paying monthly on this $100,000 bill, that student loan you took out. What would be your monthly payment? And then when you're finished with that, let's go over here and look at column H. You're going to use an if statement here. So PMT function here and if statement here. What you want to appear in this cell, and says your feelings on that? Well, if the loan payment that you calculated here is more than $700, I want this cell to say, wow, that's a lot. But if the payment is under $700, I want you to put, I can afford this. Like, this is great. That's not that much money. So put, wow, that's a lot if it's equal to or greater than 700, or if it's less than 700, I can afford this. Pause the video. Don't look at it until you're all done at the end. I'll put the answers in here, but see if you got it right. If you were being tested, would you have gotten it right? So go ahead and pause the video. Try to figure it out and then come back. I hope you got it right. But if you notice, I went in and I filled some numbers in down here, pretending like I looked up my out-of-state and in-state tuition. And originally, we just had this first one in there. So since I had this 100,000 calculated, I can autofill this down very easily because I want to do the same thing here. Years attending times one of the tuition numbers here. So when you autofill, it's going to move down and do the same thing. Now in column G, if you got 685.78, you're correct. But if not, I'll display the formula so you can see. Let me make this a little different font so you can see it better. Let's do this. Okay. Now, when I put on my formulas, you can see that I also have absolute cell reference added to these. And that is because if you do not add that and you autofill going down, you're using 2.9% up here in G2 and 15 for the years up in G3. If you would autofill that and not have absolute cell reference turned on, you're going to get those errors. So if you did this and you hit enter and you try to autofill, when I double click here, it moved down. It doesn't take the 2.9% or 15 because I autofilled down, so everything's going to move down. You have to lock it in place. So remember good old absolute cell reference? You need to lock those cells. So that's both those dollar signs in front of the letter and the number. Then when you autofill going down, it will work out. Over here is your if statement. It should look like similar to this, look like this one. What I did here for the logical test was I looked at my payment over here in G5. So if G5 is greater than or equal to 700, we wanted to say, wow, that's a lot. So your value if true in quotations is a sentence, a statement. Wow, that is a lot. So it needs to go in quotations. But if G5 is checked over here and it's not greater than or equal to 700, so it's anything below 700, then you want the cell to say, I can't afford this. Once you hit enter, notice this one you can afford.